Welcome to the Retirement Planner Podcast, a podcast that brings clear guidance to help American families like you to navigate the journey from savings to spending in retirement. I'm your host, Don Chamberlin, a certified financial educator, and my mission for over 2 decades has been to educate and help Americans throughout our great country about their retirement planning goals. With each episode, we will tackle subjects such as Social Security, taxes, market protection, and everything else you need to know to retire with peace of mind. No financial jargon, just straightforward education and real-world wisdom to help you build the retirement you've worked so hard to achieve. Join me as we explore how to help you make your money work as hard as you have. Welcome back to the Retirement Planner Podcast. I'm Don Chamberlin. The Retirement Planner Podcast is brought to you by Chamberlin, which is chamberlin-group.com. And we're happy to have our guest today, DC Chamberlin. Now, in our family, my dad was Don, I'm Don, and then we named our son Don. So around the office, he's DC, so we're not confused about everything. And he's actually been with our firm for 15 years. And at this point, he's considered one of the very top holistic planners in the country. And he's also a certified financial planner. So welcome to the podcast. We're happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Good. So we're going to get into discussing a little bit more about the specifics of the bucket plan. We talked earlier in the last couple podcasts on the importance of planning and some of the structure we put behind that when we're doing holistic plans and what the bucket plan is, the 3-bucket approach there. So what's the investment philosophy that clients utilize when they're using this bucket planning approach of the now bucket for an emergency fund, the soon bucket for income, and the later bucket for growth?
Yeah, and really, I mean, the idea behind the whole thing is figuring out time horizons and how they kind of can impact a portfolio over time and planning around that. We know
Right.
that over time stocks do pretty well, but we also know that short-term volatility can really hurt somebody, and especially as somebody who's taking money out in retirement.
Right.
And so you want to be really mindful of that. You want to be really conscious of that, and the bucket plan solves for that. So, the investment philosophy really it takes a look at your portfolio and it thinks about it a little bit differently when you enter into retirement so that we can really address some of those kind of issues that arise with traditional investing and having just like a 60-40 where you might have everything at risk, right?
Yeah, so like 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds.
Yeah.
So why is everything at risk? Aren't bonds less risky?
Yeah, they should be theoretically, but if we look at even just recently in 2022, we saw that everything really went down. Stocks were down almost 20%. Bond portfolios in the 14-15% range. We saw losses. So we know that everything else actually can go down. It was a unique period of time. We had interest rates rising when the market was going down, which usually doesn't happen, but it did, right? So we want to plan around that as well and just make sure that we have kind of all of our bases covered.
Yeah, that's a great example of short-term volatility. I think most people don't even really recognize that one because it went down so fast and came back so quickly. But I hear a lot of people when they come in and talk about getting a holistic plan or figuring out their retirement income and taxes and passing those assets on to future generations, talking about what happened in 2008. Do you have any stories of that or examples or how that's affected people?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big one. A lot of people, and this is like the famous last words is this time is different, right?
Yeah.
That time was very different, right? COVID was very different. The tech bubble was very different. There's been all these different times. Every single time the market has a major volatility event, it's different, and it's always going to be different, right? And so that's the first thing. But in 2008 in particular, it was so fast. It was such a dramatic drop. People were really scared, and the people who didn't have a good plan in place reacted. And that's why the bucket planning approach is so important, because
Yeah.
it helps people have that confidence to know that their money that is at risk is planned out for a much later period of time down the road. So we're not thinking about right now, this year, what's happening. We're thinking about, well, what does this mean 5 or 10 years down the road? And we know that when we have that kind of a time horizon, that we have much more reliable outcomes. And we know that, the chances of our stock portfolio really doing well is much greater. So
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
be able to just isolate any period of time, even in 2008, and know that you have a plan for that, and you have a place to draw income even when the market's down and not be affected by it, is really helpful.
Yeah, I know being in the business at that time, it was a scary time. I remember the end of 2008, we were thinking, will even the US government hold up? Will we get into 2009 and the government be able to sustain what's going on with major financial institutions in big trouble? Some of them going out of business. Other corporations, like two of the major automakers in our country, filed bankruptcy at that time. And it was just people were defaulting on bonds. It was just a really scary time. So, how does the bucket plan really help in a situation like something like that? Because the real issue here is we don't want that to happen to people 5 years before they retire or 5 years after they retire. And some people call this the retirement red zone. So if another 2008 comes, a lot of people are saying, I want to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what it really does is it takes that traditional portfolio we were talking about, and it pulls it apart, and it says the more conservative investments that we have are going to be focused on, providing us income in those earlier years of retirement, so we can really build that kind of bridge, and let the stock part of the portfolio be invested still. It's kind of like, when you're at work and you're investing in your 401k, you don't worry about it as much, maybe, because you don't necessarily need to rely on it
Right.
for income,
You've got
especially.
years. You got years before you have to start drawing it down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the further and further you are away, the more you're not going to worry about it as much. That's essentially what we're doing, is we're saying, hey, let's give this another 10 years on this money. Let's focus on the money that we need to take out, make it conservative, make it available. And that really helps to, it does a couple things. Psychologically, there's a benefit to it, just knowing that money's there. But also there's major risk factors with drawing down on a portfolio that's decreasing that you're eliminating altogether.
Okay. What are some of those risk factors that you run into?
Yeah, so this may have been talked about previously, but sequence of returns risk is the biggest one, which, if the market goes down and you're drawing off of it, you could dig yourself into a deeper and deeper hole.
Right. Right.
And it's pretty much going to get to a point where if it happens in, say, like a 2008, it could be insurmountable, right? And it could be devastating for a retiree trying to draw off their portfolio if they get into that math, that really bad math. And so putting that bucket plan in place, setting it up right, allows you to have a plan to sidestep that. And so
Yeah.
when those losses are occurring in your later bucket, guess what? You're not making it worse by drawing money out when the market's going down. You're letting it just come back and recover on its own, and that's really important.
Yeah. So this is a huge factor. This whole sequence of returns risk. If you have, like, let's say you had a dot-com bubble, that's 3 years the market was down from 2000 to 2002. It was down 49%. You would have to be drawing income all those 3 years
Yeah.
out to cover your expenses in retirement. You can't stop drawing it out, even though the market's gone down 49%. So I don't know, you'd be down way more than 49% because you've been drawing out for 3 years in a row. It's kind of like the reverse of, you're kind of protected when you're in the accumulation phase, because what's happening is in the 401k, if you're continually contributing on a monthly basis, you're doing dollar cost averaging. So you're averaging your riskiness a little bit.
And it's benefiting you over time, right? It's a big benefit.
Right. Because and you have a long timeline to do that. When you retire, if you're doing the opposite, now you're drawing down. It's kind of like it's a reverse of what you're doing when you're doing the 401k. So this is really a critical time. So we talked a little bit about some of these issues and how they're forming. Give us an idea about how we can construct that income for people that's going to give them a little bit more stability and confidence in retirement. That would mostly be the soon bucket, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So again, when we're thinking bucket planning, we have the now bucket is really, we think of that as, okay, well, what you keep at your bank, right? Like what is your reserves, your emergency fund, whatever you
Hmm.
feel comfortable with there really is the way, that's the rule of thumb there. But in our soon bucket, that's where we're setting up that, protected piece, that more conservative piece of your portfolio that's designed to help you weather the storm.
Sure.
And so there's several different things you can do here. The most common thing when people are looking at an investment portfolio is to look at some kind of a bond solution. The problem there is that we've seen bonds can have volatility as well.
Right.
There's issues with bond mutual funds at times, where that's a tricky thing. Even laddering bonds, it just then you don't have as much diversification. You're going more with individual bond issuances, and so that's where you might have some issues with those kinds of things. But there are a lot of different varieties of things we can do. One of the biggest things is that we can say, hey, why don't we just set this money aside in a vehicle that can protect the money and give us systematic distributions that we know are going to be there over the coming years, and that would be
Sure.
utilizing some kind of an annuity, and that'll build us that bridge, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, however long we want it to be, till where we can set that money in your later bucket and let it grow, and insulate from sequence of returns
Hmm.
risk.
So how does the annuity work differently than just if we were to say bonds? Because I've been in this business for nearly 40 years now, and I always was teaching people to use bond funds and do that type of thing as an alternative to stocks. Now, how does an annuity fit in, particularly in retirement? Because
Yeah,
that's what we are. We're the Retirement Planner podcast.
right.
How does it fit in to help with that income need?
So yeah, so a lot of times when people think annuity, they're like, "Oh, I need it." I mean, it's a pension, right? Like it's a guaranteed income for life. You're drawing it, it's there. If you die a few years in, the money's gone. The pension company, the insurance company keeps it, and you have nothing to show for it, right? We're not talking about annuity in that sense. We're talking about, actually, it's really like comparing it to like a bond portfolio. It's like another investment vehicle
Yeah.
where the insurance company is going to give you some guarantees. They're going to give you some parameters. And so we're talking about what's called a deferred annuity, where you put some money into it
Okay.
and you have, typically you can draw 10% per year off of it. And some of the parameters in specific types of annuities, they'll give you a guarantee that you'll never lose any money in the annuity. And so that right there, that guarantee will give you an assurance that if sequence of returns risk comes to rear its ugly head, as it does time and time again when Mr. Market isn't doing so well, we have that downside protection in place. And that's going to really help us weather the storm, take out our distributions, feel comfortable about it, enjoy our retirement. While the rest of our portfolio in our later bucket might be experiencing volatility, but guess what? We know it's for later on down the road that we need to access those funds. So we feel really good about that, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of comfort in that.
So it's really getting a sense of peace of mind by doing this bucket plan. And one thing you mentioned about using these annuities as kind of an asset class. What we're hearing and finding from a lot of people in the investment world, and these are investment researchers and analysts and things of that nature, is that these annuities are starting to become more of an asset class. In fact,
Mhm.
one of the very top people in investing worldwide, his name is Roger Ibbotson, did an article on this a few years ago, that annuities can be used as an asset class, just like bonds and stocks in a portfolio now. So
Right.
can you explain kind of how that works?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say, like, I think of Roger Ibbotson as like a financial scientist. Like he's really taken a lot of time in his career to look at the numbers, look at the data, do those deeper dives on things. And he did this, and one of the things he found is that, yeah, it does, adding an annuity can improve risk adjusted returns in your portfolio. And so when I talk about risk adjusted returns, for the nerds out there, you might know what I'm saying right away, but for
I'm
most
not really
people,
sure.
yeah,
Explain it.
but for most people, they might not know. And so when
Yeah.
I'm talking about that, I'm getting into my kind of portfolio background here. But it's really talking about, for every unit of risk that you're taking in your portfolio, trying to get as much return as possible. So if I told you we could take less risk and get more return, you'd say, hey, that probably makes sense, right?
Right.
Or there's other ways of looking at it, but essentially, risk-adjusted returns are just really measuring on an apples-to-apples comparison how you're doing versus a different investment, because you might be taking all the risk in the world and having all the return in the world, and you're at the highest return level, but maybe there's a more efficient part of your portfolio, and it might not
Sure.
even be there. It might actually be that annuity that you're putting in, because guess what? You have a floor of 0% is the worst you can do, and you can still get a positive return. There aren't a lot of other pieces of your portfolio that give you those kind of return
Hmm.
characteristics. So when you mix that in from a diversification perspective, it actually really adds to, the portfolio, and helps to kind of give you something that's not quite as correlated as everything else.
Yeah, and we've seen this when we do classes digitally or in the community. People come in to do their holistic plans, and we'll run it on a software platform. And when we add the annuity to the portfolio mix, what ends up happening is it has the income stream last longer. In other words, it's extending the amount of money that you can have for the rest of your life. Do you have any examples of that or how that's actually worked?
Yeah, so and that's something that I think all of the financial softwares that we use, one of the things we like to look at, it's kind of like people may have heard of this. It's called a Monte Carlo simulation, where it's like
Hmm.
looking at it and running an analysis, running a bunch of trials, which look at, if you have good returns, bad returns, all this. But this is the real way to stress test someone's portfolio and understand, do we think this is going to hold up over the long run? And so it's really across the industry and the most accepted way of kind of measuring how a plan might work down the road. And so when we go and run that analysis and see, with an annuity in the mix, we will see that basically it can really enhance those outcomes depending upon each person's unique situation.
Hmm. A lot of times, what we're finding is this is a driving factor. Like running out of money is a real key factor, and that's what we talked about in the last two episodes. And we just talked about it with sequence of returns risk.
Right,
Obviously,
right.
um, running out of money is a key thing. That's what the majority of the people in this country are concerned about. Whenever we see studies that come out, one had it as high as 60 some percent. I think Allianz did a study on that. And another one had it around 40%. But somewhere in there, people are very concerned about running out of money. But I think just from talking to people, the second thing in a lot of cases is taxes. People think taxes are high. They're not necessarily high right now. They at one point the highest tax bracket was 90%. I think our highest tax bracket right now is 37%. Throughout the whole decade of the 70s, the average tax rate for the highest bracket was 70%. So we're about half of that now. But still, if you have to have something like a third of your income taken out when you're taking money out of your IRAs and 401ks, shouldn't be that high, should it, if you're tax managing it properly?
Yeah, and so there's all sorts of things that you can kind of get into with tax management to really improve the process along the way that are really important. And one of the things that I always like to mention to people is, most advisors out there can't talk about taxes, number one, which is tricky, because when you look at it and you really think about it, you're like, well, what are you going to pay in taxes on something? 20%? Let's just say that the conservative, maybe 20%, 15%.
Yeah.
So what are you paying management fees to an advisor? Industry standard somewhere around 1%. So, but if you're not looking at taxes, which are 15%, how much value could there be in managing that if we can eliminate
Right,
that or
right.
reduce that dramatically? Right away, you have a way of immediately justifying a management fee if you are doing tax management. And so, what we try to do is be very conscious of that when we're bucket planning. We try to look
Correct.
across our entire plan and think about ways to do this. Specifically in the later bucket, some of the things we get into is with after tax accounts. We look at tax loss harvesting. There's studies out there that show that that alone adds 1% in value over time, tax loss harvesting. So right there, you've already completely justified what you're paying to work with your advisor, irregardless of the returns and anything else that's a part of the overall mix. So that's kind of the stuff that we think is really important overall, in the mix there. And we move on from that and think about things like broth conversion planning. So
Correct.
if we're looking at an overall plan, and we're seeing, that, we've got a lot of money in qualified retirement accounts. To me, this is an immediate thing to say, well, what's true about those accounts? What's true?
You're going to pay taxes on the money when you take it out.
Right. So
Either you are or your children are when they
somebody
inherit. Someone will have to pay taxes.
is going to
on
pay
it.
taxes
Right.
on that. And we know right now taxes are on sale, right? Relative to where they've been historically. We're at the lowest point pretty much ever, right? So thinking about that. Now that's going to change maybe in the next couple of years here, which is all the more reason to think about this sooner rather than later. But if we can lock in lower tax rates and pay lower taxes on this money now and compound it in a place where it's tax free, that can make a huge difference.
Correct.
So,
So taxes are a big part of what we do. We feel like that's by doing this tax planning, and we've been doing taxes here at Chamberlin since 2003. So we've had a lot of experience. We have 2 accountants on staff that do our clients' taxes and help us with some of the tax planning that we do for our clients. We find that it puts more money into the pockets of our clients throughout their retirement. So it's a very big part of what we're doing every day. And I have a lot of clients that come in and they show me their statements. And at the bottom of each statement, it says no matter who they're dealing with, if it's a bank or an insurance company or brokerage firm or an investment firm, it says down there, we do not give tax or legal advice. So we feel a lot of this is, we talked a little bit about holistic planning, how we feel like taxes are so important. This is really a very critical area for what we're doing. So Roth conversions, how do we do that? Because I think most people, you brought it up, most people have looked at that in the past, and sometimes they've got an advisor that's looked at it and said, oh, you don't want to do that because if you convert your whole $500,000 Roth, you're going to pay way too much in taxes. So how would you approach that with someone if they came in and asked you about Roth conversions?
yeah, and everybody's really different on this, and some of it does really have to do with how passionate you are about making Uncle Sam less of a beneficiary,
Right.
and making your family more of a beneficiary, right?
Correct.
There is a risk component to it, obviously, because you're paying those taxes now, so you're taking some money off the table that would be compounding otherwise, right? If it's in your IRA, it would potentially be compounding there, but the beauty of doing that is that you're putting it into a place where it's going to compound tax free now so that you have, I would almost look at it as a secondary emergency fund. That's the way that we look at it with our clients, is we look at it as a growth vehicle where we're saying, let's load up and have a really good growth strategy there. Diversification is a good approach to this, but you really want that money to grow because it's going to grow tax free. So you actually kind of adjust your portfolio over time to have a little bit more growth in your Roth, a little bit less growth in other parts, so you still have that same mix.
So more income coming out of the tax deferred.
Tax deferred, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not building up the tax deferred where you're going to pay taxes when it comes out. You're actually putting the higher growth type portfolios in with the Roth.
Yeah, and I would say higher growth is a
Right.
good way of putting it, but I also would say it's not speculative at all. Like, we want to make sure we're having the growth, so it's really purposeful the way that we're doing
Okay.
that. And we're not taking a lot of chances. We're just focusing on growth there, but in a very consistent way. And I think that's very important. And when you have that, and we've seen this with clients, that really starts to become the growth engine of the overall portfolio. And that's what you want growing, right?
Mhm.
If I could say, what would you, in an ideal world, no taxes paid now, like if you could just pick which one you want your money in, is anybody going to say an IRA or an after-tax account over a Roth? No. I
Mhm.
mean, almost everybody should say a Roth, right? So that's kind of the idea, is if we're making more dollars with growth anywhere, we want to have that happening in the best account possible.
Great. So you're my investment advisor.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people out there didn't realize that. He's my investment advisor. And we've talked about Ross in doing this. And I think that, one thing that you mentioned to me was you wouldn't want to take that lump sum Roth conversion. You would probably look at my tax situation, try and figure out exactly what tax bracket I'm in right now and see if it's
Absolutely.
worthwhile to do it this year or next year. Or maybe like if I were to retire, that's better because I'm in a lower tax bracket type of thing. Explain how you would approach something like that.
Yeah, and I was actually just having this conversation with someone today on the phone who has, they've actually set up a couple of annuities that are growing to provide income for them, guaranteed income in retirement, and they're in a really good spot on those pieces. And they're about to be in this phase where they could start accessing that once they're post 59 and a half. And we were talking about this. I was like, you know what? You may still want to just let those grow, because that's a prime time to consider doing Roth conversions, right?
Right.
And so then another thing you might want to do is you might want to delay Social Security and maximize it. But guess what? There's a benefit to doing that. Social Security can be a larger part of your income if you let it grow more. So there's kind of all these things that intersect. And
so it's not taxed in the early years of Social Security, and it allows you to do more on the Roth.
Right. You're taking more off of your tax return. And if you have the means to, if you have after-tax accounts that are already in place, not qualified retirement, we're talking about where you put money in and it grows and you have capital gains treatment, you could use those to live off of in those earlier years as your income. And you could convert as much as you possibly can over to Roth, filling up those earlier brackets till a certain point, because there are certain things to consider. You get to Medicare payments. If you're before 65, you don't have to worry about that. But once you hit age 65, you have one thing that we run into a lot is starting around 200,000, you have surcharges on Medicare.
Correct.
So depending upon how aggressive you want to be with the Roth conversions, and I could probably justify any amount for any client when you see the end numbers. You could really get a lot of money over to a Roth on a year-by-year basis. But there are different parts where it becomes less and less efficient of a thing to do.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today, DC. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
And it's fun to work with you. It's fun to work with my son and have him know so much about these topics to help people out there. At Chamberlin, we are an education-based firm, so please join us on our website at chamberlin-group.com, and you'll see there where you can be a part of different classes that we do virtually, where you can learn more and more about this, these topics about retirement. We're really going to continue to focus on this, continue to plug into this podcast as we go forward, because we'll have more and more great topics and different people from all over the country speaking with us to help you on your retirement journey. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you real soon. Thank you so much for watching the podcast today. Our mission is to bring an education-first approach to help countless families like you turn their retirement dreams into reality. Have specific questions about today's podcast? Do you want to learn more about our holistic planning approach? Click the button below to schedule a call with one of our financial educators. Subscribe to our podcast and share with others who could benefit from this episode. Check out our YouTube channel for more videos on this retirement planning subject. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for all your retirement planning needs. Remember, planning for retirement is a journey, not a sprint. It's about taking those critical steps today to secure your future. Until next time, keep planning, keep dreaming, and keep moving forward on the path to your confident and fulfilling retirement.